Good morning. As we go to the Chitas of today, we start the portion of Matis Mase. It's a double portion. As we go to the end, we come to the end of the book of Bamidbar. We're holding on chapter 30, verse number 2. Moshe spoke Matis to the head of the tribes of Bnei Yisrael, to the Jewish people, Lamer, saying, Zehadava Shativ Hashem, this is what God has commanded. Rashi says over here, he gave an honor to the princes by teaching them first this halacha, this law, and then he taught it to the rest of the Jewish people. And how do we know that the same is true to all the communications? That first he taught it. There was a schedule. First he taught it to the leaders of the Jews. Therefore it says, because the Torah states, Aaron and all the leaders of the community would approach him, and Moshe would speak to them. After that, all the Jews would come near. Why then did the Torah see fit to say this concept right over here, that he spoke first to the leaders, in order to teach us that the annulling of a vow can be performed by an individual and an expert sage. You don't have to have a bezdin. You can go to an expert sage, and he can annul your vow. Individual. If no expert sage is available, then the next step is to go to 3 people, even 3 ordinary people. You can create a bezdin, a court, for this concept, to gather 3 regular people together and annul the vow in front of these 3 people. Or perhaps Moshe indeed said this passage only to the princess, because it says there's Zehadavar. Zehadavar is like regarding animals, Torah outside the sanctuary, referred to just as there. It was said to Aaron and his sons and all of Jews, as it says, speak to Aaron, so too this passage Osher was said to all of Jews. Because there are some people who translate this as the law is to leaders, because usually leaders make promises, and they want to get their leadership, so they make whole promises, and they never keep their promises. Zehadava, again, whenever the word zeh, this, Moshe nisnab b'koyam and Hashem k'chatzeis halayla, usually it says koyam Hashem. This is what God says. But Moshe Rabbeinu had an extra nevius. That's why they come Navi Moshe. Because every other prophet always prophesies in the word koy, that thou, thus God has said. Not this is God has said. But Moshe Rabbeinu many times says zeh. Because Moshe Rabbeinu had total clarity. It's not thou. It's I know exactly what the Eibush said word for word. And that's the greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu. Another explanation, zeh hadavar. Zeh is eliminating, to limit, indicating the expert sage that tells us that when you go to a sage or a bezdin to nullify the vow, the matin neder, they're known to nullify a vow. They can't nullify somebody's vow. They can untie the vow. As you'll soon see, the Torah says a father can annul a vow, a husband can annul his wife's vow, but a bezdin needs to say matin, we untie your vow. And that's the power of the bezdin, or the rabbi, or the expert. So he unties the vow. He can't annul a vow. So each one has to say it in their language. So that's why he says the sages use the expression vatara, releasing, while when annulling vows, where a husband used the expression hafara, which is annulling of the vow. Similarly, terminology is used in scripture here, but if you use the opposite form, the bezdin, if the court would use the form of annulling a vow, and the husband would use the form of untying the vow, it wouldn't work. Every person needs to use their terminology. Verse number 3. If somebody makes a vow to God, or he made a vow, an oath, to prohibit something upon himself that he's allowed. The general rule is he has to fulfill his words. He's not allowed to profane his words. Whatever he says, he should do. Now she says neder, because you have 2 words of it, neder and a shvua. Neder, one who says, I hereby take on myself a vow which will be sacred to me to sacrifice, not to eat or to eat certain things. So that's a neder. A neder, the guy says, I'm going to make a korban. I'm going to give a charity. I'm going to not do something of Allah. I'm not going to eat bread anymore. Make such a vow. He prohibits it on terms of meat. I'm not going to eat meat anymore. Makes the vow. So you're allowed to do that because you're allowed to eat meat, and now you prohibit something that you're allowed. That I might think that even if he makes an oath to eat flesh of a carcass, let's say guy makes a vow, I'm going to eat a nevela. I'm going to eat non-kosher. That's not a vow because you cannot eat non-kosher. So it's not a vow. So that's not a vow, which is forbidden of the Torah. I apply the words, I must fulfill whatever he says. Torah is therefore states to prohibit himself. You can do something to prohibit on yourself. I mean, something that is kosher. And I decide I'm not going to eat kosher meat anymore. I make a vow, I'm becoming a vegan. So I make that vow. I'm allowed to eat it. I'm not making a vow. So that's it. One is allowed to forbid that which is permitted. But one is not permitted that what is forbidden. So if a guy says, I'm making a vow, I'm going to eat treif. That's not a vow. It's not a vow. It's a stupid vow because you can't eat treif, so it doesn't make a difference, your vow. L'yachel devarim. She said, yachel means to profane, which means not to make something, to disgrace his words. Choil, Shabbos, choil. Choil is weekday. Isha can see the neder. Here the Torah gives a little bit of a leeway out for a woman. A man is obligated to keep his vow unless he goes to a bezdin or to a rabbi. But a isha can see the neder lavaya. But if a woman that makes a vow to God, and she makes his vow with base of via bin nuhurel, she makes his vow while she's still in her father's house. Bin nuhurel means that she is, as you soon see, it's a very, very short window where the father has the power to nullify his vow. Because a child makes a vow is not a vow. So by a woman in Jewish law, there's three different stages of her life. She's a ketana, a child till 12, and then there's a naira, as the pasuk says, nu'ureha, a naira, which is like 12 to 12 and a half. And then you have 12 and a half, she becomes a beggar, she becomes an adult. So there's three different stages in her life. The first stage, the vow is not a vow. The second stage, the father can annul it. The third stage, if she's not married, then she is like a regular, her vow, she has to keep her vow. So let's go to the Rashi. But meaning she is the father has the rights over her because she's still a naira and she's still a maiden, and therefore the father can annul vows even though it wasn't in the house per se. Ash says we're talking specific on a case. This is in general because you'll find many times in the Torah the laws of a na'ara, the laws of a girl that's a na'ara. A na'ara is a specific time, as Ash says, when it's the first stage of majority na'arus, neither a minor. So when neither a minor ketana nor a woman, it's a boigris. You see, you have three stages: ketana, na'ara, and boigris. Ketana is a child, nara is a middle stage, and then you have a boigris, an adult. For a minor's vow is not legal as a vow. Child makes a vow, is garnished, nothing. And a boigris, once she becomes an adult, is not under a father's jurisdiction to the extent that he can annul her vows. What's the age of a minor in this regard? Our sages say from the age of 11. And one day, her vows are examined. If she realized to whom she vowed and to whom she sanctified the object, her vow is a vow. And for the age of 12 years and one day, she does not need examinations. Her vows are binding. So we have the naira is between 12 and 12 and a half. Verse number 5. The husband, the father, talking about a naira, a girl. Her father hears her vow, and in the prohibition which she put upon herself, and let's say her father remains silent. Then her vows are vows. And every prohibition she put upon herself, Yakum becomes binding. I mean, she can go to the bezdin also and nullify her vows. But here the Torah gave the right of the father to null the vow. if the father heard it on the day that he heard of the vow, but all her vows and her prohibitions, Asher also nasha, and he nulls it. He says, that's not a shkait. The vows are nothing. La yakum, then they're not a vow. Vashem yislach lo, and the Eibushter will forgive her. Because her father has hindered her. Now she says, if he held her back from her vow, he annulled it for her. I would not know what is hindering signifies hinir, but because it says, but her fiancé, because we go to the next level when she's engaged, and now she has betrothed herself to a man. Now he can also nullify her vow. So here we have the next case when she's engaged. But if her fiancé hinders her the day he hears, you may infer that his hindering means annulment. And it's the context meaning it denotes the holding and removing. Hine is the context of removing. So we see, why do you discourage te'inun? So now she brings another pasuk in Bamidbar that we see the concept te'inun, hinia is the concept of holding back. Similarly, my head does not reject yani, anointed on him. Similarly, we find the te'uni see my alienation. Hashem yislach lo. What does it mean God's forgiven? What does God have to forgive him? What does the meaning of the Eibush has to forgive her? What kind of sin she did? She had a vow. We know the vow. So why does God need to forgive anybody for the annulment of a vow? So Rashi says, that's why Rashi says when the Torah says this, the Torah is talking about a specific kind of case. To what is the verse referring to? A woman who took a Nazarite vow, and her husband heard her and annulled the vow, annulled it without her knowledge, and she transgressed her vow through drinking wine or ritual defilement itself, contact with the dead, and she didn't realize that her husband annulled the vow or her father annulled the vow. Such a woman requires forgiveness, even though that her vow was already annulled. When she transgressed, what's the problem? Her father annulled the vow. Her husband annulled the vow. So what's the problem? Nevertheless, she didn't know that. So she did, in her aspect, she did a sin unintentionally. And if those whose vows are annulled require forgiveness, all the more so those who transgress vows and have not been annulled. That's what the pasuk was to tell you. If you have to have forgiveness for a sin that you didn't even do, but in your estimation you did it, but really you didn't do it because the father annulled the vow. But nevertheless, you have to ask forgiveness because to you it was a problem. If she's engaged, she's married, and she makes a vow, and she makes a vow, then even though she's married, she has to keep her vow. Just because she's married, she doesn't have to get. Rashi says, again, there was an arusa and a nesua. There was a concept of betrothal and marriage. Those days they made it in two different times, maybe years apart. So there was an arusa. An arusa is a married betrothed woman. She's married legally. She's married, but she's not. She didn't go through. They didn't come to get under the chuppah yet to come to actually live with each other. So she's betrothed. She's a married woman. If they would break up right now after this betrothal, they would have to get a get, like even they got married. This refers to a betrothed woman, or maybe referring to a married woman, since it says she took the vow and her husband's house. The law's fully married woman is already stated. So preface here that it refers to a betrothed woman. What does the Torah want to teach us? Torah hereby specifies a unique law regarding her, that a betrothed woman has a unique law. And that her father if she's a nara, she's between 12 and 12 and a half, then she needs to have both of them annul a vow, because at this present time she's basically in that stage where she is still a child in her father's house, and she's at the same time betrothed to somebody else. And that's that situation. Let's see, she was betrothed, a young girl, and then she's going to get married many years later. That's what the Torah could. The Sushka hereby specify a unique law regarding her, and her father and her fiancé must both annul her vows. If the father annulled the vow, but the fiancé did not, or the fiancé annulled the vow, but the father did not, it's not annulled. And certainly this too is also, if one of them upheld it, then even though the other one didn't uphold it, she has to keep the vow. But that's a very specific kind of law. A girl that's between 12 and 12 in her house, that's betrothed, and still in her father's house. She's not married yet, she's only betrothed. Rashi says she made the vow in her father's house, but her father did not hear about them before the betrothal. And thus they were neither annulled nor confirmed. But if her fiancé heard about this vow on the day that he heard it, and he said he was quiet about it, so her vows become a vow. Her vows become a vow, and she is like anybody else. She wants to annul the vow, she has to go to Bezdin. From here we see that the fiancé upheld the vow. It is valid. But if the day that the vow was said, the fiancé says it's nothing, he was nullified the vow. Which she said, the words that she prohibited herself upon, and the Eibishter, God will forgive her. Now she says, one might think that even the father did not annul it. Taylor therefore states, in her youth, while her father's house, as long as she's in her youth, she's under her father's jurisdiction. Verse number 10, if you have a woman that's an almana, a widower, or grusha, a divorced woman, whatever she makes a prohibition, she's like a man, yakom aleh, she's obligated to follow it. Now she says, whatever she prohibits upon herself, she remains binding upon herself. Since she made it she is under neither the father's jurisdiction nor her husband. Torah is talking about a widow from the full marriage. They got a widow from the betrothal. Her husband dies. She reverts back to being, again, as long as she's 12 and a half, she goes back to her father's house. If she took a vow in her husband's house, a full married woman, or imposed a prohibition upon herself with an oath, that's why I said Asha ben Nesua. We're talking about a fully married woman. A fully married woman, if her husband heard the vow and he was quiet, he did not hinder the vow from her. All her vows are vows. But if her husband nullifies the vow, the day that he heard the vow, the vow is nullified, and it's like she didn't make a vow. Her vow has no value, and it's nullified the vow. She made the vow, and her husband can nullify the vow. So Torah gave another way of getting out of vow for a Jewish woman, a married woman, that she can get out of the vow through her husband. Now she says, since it says that a husband annuls the vow, I might think that the vow, all vows included. If the Torah says lanes nefesh, Torah says the interesting of husband also. There's not one more restriction on the husband. A husband can only nullify the vow something that is a self-affliction. A person says, his wife says, I'm not going to eat meat anymore. So that's a self-affliction situation. And he's allowed to say, you know what, I nullify the vow. Indicating that he can only involve self-affliction. These are all go to the Gemara. But if she says, I'm going to give charity, that's not self-affliction. And he cannot nullify such kind of vows. He only can nullify a vow that's going to be self-afflicting, hurting her privately. If a husband remains silent from one day until the next day, she has established all the vows on her, because he was quiet the day that it was said. Now she says, in order that one not say the day of hearing means 24-hour period, the one day until the next day, to teach us that he can only annul it until nightfall. It's not 24 hours. It's within the 24 hours. He has till nightfall. She made it the daytime. He has till nightfall. She made it at night. He has the next nightfall. But if he annuls them after having heard, he will bear her iniquities. What is the meaning? After he heard and upheld it, saying, I approve it, he retracts and annuls it, even the same day, that's his sin. But Nasr Avena, he takes her place of punishment. We learn from here that a person who causes another to stumble takes his place for all punishments for which he may be liable, the other person may be liable. And here the husband, in essence, did that. He put a stumbling stock before his wife. He said, I accepted the vow. And then he says, I know, this is not a game. And we're talking about a vow with God's name. You don't play around with such kind of things. This is the rule which that God commanded Moshe, between a man and his wife, between a father and his daughter, when she's a nara, when she's a maiden, in the father's house. Verse chapter 31, to be a longer chitas as we put the two portions together, mates and maseh. So it's a double header this week. Chapter 31, verse number 1. And God spoke to Moshe. I want you to go and take revenge from the Jewish people, from the Midianites. If you do this war, you will pass away. I want you to revenge the Midianites and not the Moabites. For the Moabites did not get involved in the matter out of fear. Because Moabites got involved in the matter out of fear. For they were afraid that the Israelites would plunder them. So, in such as the restriction stated to them about the Moabites was not to provoke them in war. But the Midianites interfered in a dispute that did not affect them. They were not going to Midian. And nevertheless, as the Moshe Moshe Rabbeinu asked the Midianites, but they did not. They went out to a war that has nothing to do with them, and therefore that's why the Abish says, "I want you to take revenge of the Midianites." Another explanation that they did not take revenge on the Moabites on account of the two good doves that would come to produce from them. Ultimately, the Abish saw in the future that from Moab will come out two beautiful birds, so the beautiful gems, and that is Rus, Nama Hamanit, the Ruth and the Moabite, Nama the Ammonite, and therefore the Abish didn't want to destroy them. And Moshe Rabbeinu said to the nation, from amongst the men of the army, Midian will go out to war with Midian. Lost is Nikmas Hashem in Midian to do God's vengeance on Midian. Rashi says, even though he heard, Moshe Rabbeinu heard from God himself, you go out to this war, you're going to die. So you would say, okay, I'll go out in a year. But Moshe Rabbeinu, he acted with joy and not with delay. The Eibishter told him, go out to war, you're going to die after it. He went out to war with simcha, he went to do the mitzvah. Hechaltzu, he was a lackard. Anoshim, tzadikim, righteous men. As it says, Bachal on Anoshim, choose righteous men. Chachamim v'yeduim. Nikmas Hashem, for who arises, because why your vengeance of God? They went against the Jews. So Rashi says, for one who arises to attack the Jew, he arises to attack God himself. And therefore, you're taking the vengeance of God. Elef lamata. You must send 1,000 to a tribe, Evel Almata, 1,000 to each tribe. Tishlach Latzava, you send it to the army. L'Rabbi Shevet Levi, that's why even this war, Shevet Levi had to go out to this war. And from the thousands of Israel, 1,000 were given to each tribe. Shneim Asa Elef, that 12,000 Chaluti Tzava went out to war. Rashi says, this comes to show the beauty of the Jewish people, how dear they are to Israel. Before they heard about his death, they didn't say, before long, they will stone me. But once they heard about the death of Moshe was dependent upon taking revenge of Midian, they did not wish to go out to war. They said, forget it. We're not going to war. Vayimsru, therefore the word is Vayimsru. They went out the word begrudgingly because they understood also. Moshe Rabbeinu was excited. He did it with excitement, but they did it with less excitement because they knew that the Moshe Rabbeinu is going to pass away after this story. Moshe Rabbeinu sent them 1,000 per tribe to the army. As Pinchas ben Elazar HaKohen and Pinchas the son of Elazar HaKohen Latzava, Kli HaKodesh, and all the vessels, the whole v'chatzetza trua, and also he'd send them out with the blasting of the shofar and chatzetza trua and biyadei in his hand. So he sent them out with all of these things. He sent them out to the army. Now she says, Rashi said, come to teach us that Pinchas, Pinchas was married equal to all of them, and one who fulfills the filling of his command by killing Cosby, the daughter of Tzur, should be completed. Not because he went first, because he was the one who started this whole situation with Midian. And when he went out to avenge Yosef, another explanation, he went out to avenge Yosef, his mother's ancestor. As it says, the Midianites sold Yosef to Egypt. And from where do we know that the Pinchas' mother descended from Yosef? Because it says Eliezer, the son of Aaron, married one of the daughters of Putiel, meaning from the descendants of Yisrael, who fattened the calves of the idol worship, and from the descendants of Yosef, who pitted his evil inclination. Another explanation: Pinchas went because he was was a priest anointed to the war. That's the simple meaning. Ukli HaKodesh, and what does it mean in the sacred vessels? This refers to the ark and the forehead plate, the tzitz. It was with them because Bilam was with the Midianites, and through sorcery he made the kings of Midian fly. Oh wow, this was an interesting measures. And he also flew along with them. And Pinchas, in response, he laid the forehead a plate upon which the heavenly name was graved, and they fell. It was therefore says Al Chalaleim, upon their slain. Regarding the kings of Midian, they did a trick, sorcery. They did a trick, and they basically all became like flying saucers, and they fell ultimately. Similarly, regarding to Bilam, it says Al Chalalaim, he fell upon the dead. So they fell from the above to below. Biyadai means b'reshusai, in his hand means in his possession. Verse number 7, Yitzbu al Midian, and they attacked Midian. Kashatziva Hashem es Moshe, like God commanded Moshe, Vayagu kol zoch, and they killed every male. Malchim Midian haragu, and they killed, and here in the Medrash, killed the Midianite kings. Al Chalaleim, they fell upon the dead. Es Ave v'Rekem v'Tzur v'Schur, Eve Rekem, Tzur and Chur, v'Reva and Reva. Chameshes Malchim Midian, the 5 kings of Midian were destroyed. V'Ez Bilam, and they Ben Be'er and Bilam, the son of Be'er, Hargu b'Charev, they killed him by the sword. Now she says the 5 kings, though I not see that the scripture enumerates 5. So why does the Torah to say again 5? Why does the Torah need to say 5? It's only to teach us that they all equal conspired against Jews, and therefore they all were punished alike. Bilam had gone to Midian to collect his fee for 24,000 Israelites that fell as a result of his scheme. That's what was Bilam doing there. Bilam said, "I gave you an idea, and I got to get paid for it." So he found himself there. He went forth to Midian to meet Israel to turn them to bad advice. He said to them, "When you were 600,000, you were able to overcome them, and now that they're 12,000, come to battle with them." They then repaid him in full and did not deprive him from his due desert. They ultimately killed him. Bacharev, Ash says he led against the Jews by exchanging his skills, for their only help by the power of their mouth. through their prayer and request, and he came to surprise the skill by cursing them with his mouth. They in turn came against him and exchanged their skills with the skills of his skills. They took a sword and they killed him with the sword. Who taxed the sword and said, "You live by the sword, so we're going to kill you. We're going to put you to death with a sword." Verse number 9. And the Israelites took the women of Midian, Vestapam and their children, Veskol Behemtam and all their animals, Veskol Mikneim, Veskol Chalilim, and they took all their possessions. They set fire to all of the residential cities. They destroyed the whole place. She says, Makom Nitirasam, the place of the place of the palaces, meaning the dwelling of the priests. Versed in this law. Another explanation: this denotes the seats of their nobility. Sarani Plishtim, the rulers of Plishtim. Verse 11, Vayikro, they took us Hashallah, they took all the booty, Veskala Makayach, and all the plunder, Ba'adam, in the humans, or Ba'behema, in the animals. Now she says, this tells us that they were upright and righteous, for they did not suspect of stealing by misappropriating the beauty, what they grabbed without permission. For it says, as Kol Hashallah, all the beauty. And about them, it says it's right, and the teeth are like a flock of ooze. Even the soldiers amongst them, you are all righteous. Beauty of the Jewish people's soldiers by Jews. Shalal, Rash says the booty, this is movable objects. Baz is also movable objects that are not jewelry. Malkoyach, one means the plunder. Plunder refers to humans and animals. And the Shevi is stated in conjunction to Makoyach. Shevi refers to humans. Makoyach refers to animals. Verse number 12. They brought this all to Moshe and Eleazar the Kohen. To the entire Jewish nation. It's Hashevi. They all brought back all the captured. Makoyach. They brought it all to the Jordan of Jericho. We are now going to go to the Tanya of the day. Okay. We're holding the 8th chapter of Tanya. Now, the Rebbe continues in the concept of what he mentioned before, that how we need the two concepts to ultimately purify the neshama, that to be able to come before God, before the able to be able to come before God in a way of rachamim, we need to first basically eliminate, break our hearts and have true menidus on the sins that we have done. So the Alter Rebbe now continues, and after the winds of forgiveness pass over the soul of the sinner and purifies them, then the souls are able to return to literally unto God Himself. And it goes higher and higher to its source, and to cleave to Him with an unbelievable unity. As He was in the ultimate union with Him, in the ultimate union with Terem Shenafcha Ruach Piv before his soul that blown forth from the breath of his mouth. In this send the Eibishter blew from his essence, and he incorporated within the body of man. This goes back to the original analogy that the Zohar brings, and the Alter Rebbe brings it down at the beginning of Tanya. Like a person who exhales from the depth from his mouth, before he takes this great exhale, it comes from the essence of his soul, as it's united with his soul. So likewise, a soul was utterly united with God before it was blown or breathed in the body, so too does it now unite with Him after repentance, and it goes back to the way it came part of Him when it was before even the Eibush God put the soul in the body. V'zu hi tshuva shalema. And then you have a complete tshuva. V'hine b'yichud zeh v'tshuva zu. This state of unity and the return of this state of unity and the return is called tshuva ilah, is what's called in the Torah tshuva, in Kabbalah tshuva ilah, the higher level of tshuva. Shala'acha tshuva tata, which comes after the lower level of tshuva. As it's brought down in the Zayah, HaKadosh, in the Holy Zayah, Berayah Mehemna, in Raya Mehemna, it's brought down Pashas Nosei, the tshuva ilahi. What is tshuva ilah? This asik b'iraisa b'dechila b'rechimo. Tshuva ilah, the higher level of tshuva, means engaging in the study of Torah with awe and love. The love of the Holy One, blessed be. So the Zohar goes on to say that doing so makes one worthy of the revelation of the letter of Vav of the Tetragram of God's name. The Vav, Yud K Vav. So Yud K is the upper level of godliness. Vav is Amshacha. Vav brings down is the capability to come down. The Eibishter comes down. He's mamshich himself in this world, and that's the concept of Amshacha. The way the Eibishter comes down in this world. So that's Torah. Torah is the same concept. The way the Eibishter comes down. But we have to be zeicha that the God should come down in us. The Il ben Yudke Bina, for the letter Vav is a child of Yudke or Bina. Hey is Bina. Bina is the level of Tshuva ilah, the return of the higher letter Hey of the Tetragram, God's name. The word itself is composite of the words Ben Yud Hey. Bina. Bina, if you take the word Bina, you have within it 4 letters. You took the Beis Nun, is Ben, Yud Hey. So Bina is Ben, the son of Yud Kei. This alludes to the spiritual, emotional of love and fear, represented in the letter Vav, that because the letter Vav is a 6 midas. The letter Vav is also number 6. So it's the Yud Kei. That's why Chochmah and Bina have a child. Chochmah and Bina is Av and Aim. Bina is Aim and Chochmah is Av. Together they have a child, Ben. What do they have? Yudkei. They have Ben Yudkei. They have the son of Yudkei. What is the son of Yudkei? Is the midas, is the attributes, the character, Ava and Yira, etc. The 6, the Vav. They're like level, touching on the Yud and the Chochmah and the Hey is Bina. Umaylas Bal Tshuva al Tzaddik Niburim B'Zahi. Herein lies the superiority of a penitent over the one who's perfectly righteous. So seemingly the study of Torah permeates with love and fear of God is not a unique prerogative of penitence. The perfect saintly do this as well. So where lies the superiority about Tshuva? But you look at the Zohar in Pash Chayesara, he says, "The inam moshchi la berusa deliba yatir ubechila sagal eskava malka." They draw upon themselves with a more intense logging of the heart, and that's what the Baal Tshuva has. The Baal Tshuva, since he went away from godliness, he has a much more greater longing of the heart, much more greater longing of the heart. So it's yisan oir min achoshech. It's a greater something. It's more greater forcefulness to approach the king, because that's a concept of greater something that comes from darkness than something that comes from light. So it's about tshuva. Somebody does tshuva, he does, even though he does the same thing that the tzaddik does, but he does it with much greater intensity. He does it with much greater power. And that's the greatness of Abal Tshuva. That completes the Chumash. That completes the Tanya for today. Today is the 20, what's today? Today is, I don't know what today is. Today is the 24th day of the month, which is chapter 103 to chapter 113 to chapter 118. Do those chapters, you do the chitas of the day. The Rebbe writes today in the Hayom Yom, the day-to-day of the 24th of Tammuz. The Rebbe writes a statement, the prism of the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, for the Pnimi, for an inward person asking a blessing for Aveda, asking Besa Aveda, let them not pay attention to vain words. What is needed is to make the Aveda heavy upon a person asks a question, a blessing to do the service of God. You don't need a blessing for the service of God. You need to get out and go to do the service of God. So to ask for a blessing for the service of God, that is a wasteful blessing. Go out and get to work, and you'll figure out ultimately what means the service of God. God bless you all, everybody. In Mitzvah, I invite you today in Mitzvah at 10 a.m. We will come together and learn Tanya together at 10 a.m. at Chabad. I invite you all, either through Zoom, come to Chabad, we'll learn some Tanya. I wish you all a wonderful day. Mitzvah Shem, we'll see you all tomorrow, 8 o'clock. We'll continue to learn the Chitas of the day.